The accumulation of things in our lives has become easier and easier. It's easier to find products online, it's easier to pay for them, and to do so with money that we don't even have. Getting things delivered is cheaper and faster than ever, with even things like 24-hour delivery these days. And as we've become more and more connected to our digital devices, it's become easier and easier to be bombarded with advertisements in more and more sophisticated ways. We're constantly seeing what everyone else has, things go in and out of fashion, and so over time, people just accumulate a lot of stuff. So with this, a movement, or perhaps you could call it a recipe for life and happiness, that helps us to combat this trend of mindless consumption has blossomed in recent times. It's called minimalism. Now you might wonder, what does this have to do with language learning? Well, that's simple. All you have to do is get rid of all your stuff, except for one language textbook. Hey! Just kidding. But this does speak to perhaps the biggest and most common misconception around minimalism, which I'd like to quickly address, and then we'll discuss how this affects all of us learning languages. At its core, minimalism is actually incredibly simple. It's really just about being more mindful and intentional about the things we own rather than being owned by those things. It's about being thoughtful about every little thing that we own and simply asking the question, does this genuinely serve a purpose in my life? Or does it bring me joy? Do I actually need this? Will I actually use this? And would I miss it if it were gone, or if I'd never even had it at all? It's not about getting rid of all your things, and it should never be about depriving yourself of good things in life, or things that you love, and like I said, things that bring you joy. If something is meaningful and special to you, you should keep that thing. It's about resisting the temptation and fashionability and novelty of the new things that we're constantly exposed to, or perhaps the things that the blueprint of society tells us that we should get. It's also not just about physical possessions. I would say that in today's world, digital minimalism is equally as important to consider. So with language learning, we are now in a time where there are just so many resources available, with more and more coming out all the time. Now, for some languages, people feel lucky just to find anything that they can use and enjoy. But for more and more languages that are being learned more and more commonly, there is just an enormous amount of options, which is growing all the time. Those could be things like physical textbooks or graded readers, or these could be digital resources like ebook versions of those textbooks and readers, or of course, apps, those that we use on the web and those that we download to our mobile devices. Now, it might be more obvious and easy to consider how the lessons of minimalism can apply to those big bulky textbooks or those huge stacks of each level of graded readers. But I think these digital resources like the apps and the ebooks and so on are actually equally or even more important to discuss in this video because they are so easy to acquire. They're just a download away. Some of them are even free, and the ones we pay for are often on a recurring subscription basis, so that first payment may feel quite insignificant. It makes each and every one of these things feel like so much less. It's digital, it doesn't feel like a possession, especially if these things are free. But over the years, as I've observed my own behavior and certainly that of many other language learners around the world, I see an increasingly strong trend of just constantly acquiring new language resources and doing so without giving much thought to the impact that this actually has on our own learning, our own psychology, and our own bank accounts, without really thinking about if we even really need these things. Are we even going to use them? So let's talk about a few different scenarios that I think are very common and important to consider. So it starts when we learn about a new resource, which happens all the time these days for all the reasons I mentioned in the introduction. There's an enormous amount of advertising going on right now in the language learning space. We see our peers or even content creators talking about each and every new app that we find, new website that we recommend, or we just stumble across things as we go. Now, I want to be clear that I am not criticizing anybody who either creates something new that they genuinely feel will enrich the educational ecosystem, or anyone who is sharing or talking about the new things that they find. Let's be honest, I do both. I discuss, of course, different apps and tools and textbooks and resources that I use on this channel, and I also built my own foreign language journaling platform. I think it's wonderful that there are so many great ways to learn so many languages now, and also that it's so easy to learn more about them by looking at things like reviews or seeing content creators or friends that we trust tell us about these things. But the problem comes in scenarios like these. Number one is that we often already have plenty of resources to cover our current needs at the level we are at right now. And so by the time we would actually get through all the things we have right now, we'll already be past that level. We'll already have advanced beyond the point where these things are as useful to us. But we find this new thing, it's fashionable, it looks cool, and very often we still buy it, even though, like I said, we'll never get to it, because by the time we do, if we're going through everything we already have, we'll already be past that level. Or what happens is we're determined to use that new thing, and so we abandon whatever we were already using. And so we end up spinning our wheels, constantly jumping from one new app to the next, or one new textbook to the next, and we end up slowing down our learning a lot more, while of course spending a lot more money. Not to mention the physical space, either that on our devices or in our homes, and so on. Another scenario, which is very common, is that we find something that is at a level higher than where we are right now. And so it feels like, I'm preparing for the future. I'll get this thing so that I have it ready once I become an intermediate learner or an advanced learner. But the thing is, it's very difficult to gauge how much we're going to need at that level. It's very difficult to gauge how we're going to feel, what we will want to focus on when that time comes. And so because of that, it's very easy to accumulate tons of things for our future selves, not really realizing if we'll actually need all those things. And so the same thing occurs where we end up with so many things that we never end up using. And one last scenario that's very common, I think, is just simply collecting stuff. It does feel nice to get that new textbook that came out, even if we're way past that level. Like I said, there's a sort of aspect of just collecting things, or things come into fashion and it's nice to have them. And so I'll give you a quick example from my own language learning. The other day, I found a really nice new podcast for Mandarin Chinese, and I really liked it. They had these nice lessons. They go through different vocab, different expressions. They discuss the usage quite a lot, and then there's a conversation at the end, and they have, like a Patreon type account where you can pay $5 or $10 per month to get access to more things. And almost immediately, I thought about going to subscribe so I could get access to these things, because it seemed like a really nice resource. But then I stopped and I thought about it, and I realized, I just had my second conversation in Mandarin with Joyce on this channel. I still have the transcript for that. I have so many things I could do to really break that down and get more value from it. I still have my Journaly posts I wrote that have loads of great corrections I could go through and digest. I still have my textbook I'm going through and really enjoying. I'm just about to begin reading my first novel in Mandarin Chinese, which we'll talk about on this channel. I have so many things already that will probably take me far beyond the level of that podcast. And so thankfully, I was able to ask that question. Do I really need this? Will I actually use this? Can I afford this? And will I miss this if I never have it? And the answer to all those questions was no. And so my goal in this video is not necessarily to convert anyone to minimalism, although I do recommend looking into it if it resonates with you. It's certainly changed my life even though I haven't really talked about it so much on my channel. My goal is simply to plant a seed of mindfulness and thoughtfulness as we navigate the landscape of the bustling, physical and digital marketplace of language learning resources, so that hopefully we can all find more meaning and more value in the things that we already have. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't get that new textbook, I'm not saying you shouldn't download that really cool new app. All I'm saying is that you might want to ask yourself first, do I really need this?